I'm Anastasia Chatzka. I'm a fashion designer, pattern maker, and sewing educator, and I'm so happy you're here sewing along with me today. Underwear can be so expensive, and sometimes you want to treat yourself to something nice. Sometimes you just want to feel a little bit sexy in a nice pair of underwear. Even though nobody's gonna see them and they're under your clothes, they just make you feel empowered, right? So I have this favorite pair of underwear from Agent Provacateur. I just love the fit. I love that the sides have this gathered fabric and elastic. I love the back shape of it. And they're made out of silk charmeuse. They are so soft. It kind of feels like you have nothing on, but yet you still feel sexy under your clothes. So I wanted another pair, and these ones are kind of wearing out, and they don't sell them anymore. And I was like, I sew. Why don't I make more of these, right? Beyond the fact that you can't buy these anymore, they're $125, and I really don't want to spend $125 on these little pieces of fabric, right? We can buy so much silk charmeuse for $125. I bet we could make thousands of panties for $125. So I've got some silk charmeuse here today, and we are gonna make some high-end luxury panties. So get ready to treat yourself for like $10. That's crazy, right? The supplies for these are so inexpensive. So let's get into making these awesome panties. Well, actually they're thongs, but I'm just gonna call them panties in the video because I don't wanna keep saying thong, 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 thong throughout the entire video. Thong, 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 thong. So the first thing you want to do is download the pattern at sewinganastasia.com. I spent a ton of time pattern drafting and perfecting this and sampling it, and it's going to come in all sizes, so there's going to be a size for everyone. So download your pattern, cut it out, and then let's cut out the fabric. Listed on the pattern is going to be how many of each piece that you need to cut out. So I cut out my fabric and got my supplies together, so let's go over all of them to make sure you also have them all ready to go. So out here we have these really long strips, which are gonna be for the side of the panty. We're gonna have 2 strips of elastic for the sides of the panty. We're going to have this back piece of the panty. We're also gonna have this little liner, this little gusset here. We're gonna have the front of the panty. I've also got 4 little rings, so 2 for the back and 2 for the front. I've got a bow to make it extra fun. And then I also have some picot elastic that I'm gonna be using around the edges. If you'd like, you could also get some really fancy decorative lace for the top of the panty as well, but you don't have to. So the first thing we're gonna do is sew the main part of the thong together with the gusset. So what we wanna do is sew all 3 of these pieces together. So you wanna take the front of the thong and line it up with the back of the thong right here. And then we're also gonna take the gusset and we're gonna place it right side facing the wrong side of the front. And we're gonna sew all 3 of these layers together at the same time using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to be using a straight stitch when I sew all 3 of these layers together. Don't forget to back stitch in the beginning. Keep all your layers together. And when you're using the silk, try and go slow at the beginning so it doesn't pull it into the machine. And if it starts to, just lift up your foot, move it, flatten it out, and just go nice and slow. Back stitch at the end and cut. So let's take a look at what we just did. If you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when all the new videos come out. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching. Now let's get back to making that super cute panty. So on the outside, we have a beautiful seam keeping together these 2 pieces. And then on the inside, we have that seam there, but then this piece flips down because we sandwiched it. And so we have a really nice seam right here with the gusset. And now what I'm gonna do is just sew down the gusset to the back of the thong piece here so that way it doesn't move while we're sewing on the elastic later. And since this knit right here isn't gonna fray, I'm just gonna leave the edge raw. If you wanted, you could zigzag it, or you could also run it through a serger and do a little purl edge on it. And both of these stitches are just going to be a straight stitch down the side, holding the 2 layers together. For these stitches, you don't need to back stitch because we just need them to hold the two layers together. We're gonna be going back over this edge later with elastic and some other stitches. When you get to the end, you can cut. Now we have the gusset sewn down on both sides so it'll stay in place when we sew the elastic on. Speaking of which, next we're gonna sew the elastic on. So grab your elastic and I'm gonna show you exactly where to put it. So first thing we're gonna do is put some elastic up here where this lace is. So if you don't wanna put picot elastic here, you can buy a little scalloped lace and go ahead and sew your lace at the top of the panty here. But I'm just gonna be using this picot elastic, so I'm gonna be putting it right where this purple lace is for my thong. So what we're gonna do is take our piece of picot elastic and we're going to place it right sides together so that the straight edge of the elastic is lined up with the raw edge of our panties. And now when we put this on, we are gonna zigzag this on, and you don't need to stretch it for this part. You can just go ahead and zigzag it on nice and flat from end to end. We're also gonna be sewing elastic on the leg openings and across the back up here. So to cut the elastic, I just made sure it was a little longer than the actual measurement of the piece that I'm sewing it to, so that way I have enough of it. Now when we sew the leg openings, we are gonna be giving this a slight pull. So if we take a look at the original panty, because it's made out of a fabric that's woven and not stretchy, you'll notice that they stretch the elastic a little bit while they zigzag it down. So that way it still stretches, because this is not a stretch fabric because it's a flat woven fabric. It's a silk charmeuse, but it has that stretch because they stretch the elastic while they're sewing it on. But notice that it just gives it a little bit of a gather, not much. As I mentioned before, we're using the zigzag stitch now where all the elastic's gonna go, and we're gonna stretch it a little bit. So that way our woven fabric is still going to stretch. So if you tried doing this with a straight stitch and you tried to stretch it, it would pop and it would break all apart. So embarrassing, uncomfortable, blah, annoying, right? But just use a zigzag stitch and stretch your elastic a little bit and it's going to work perfect for you. If this is your first time doing this, grab a scrap and test it out. And remember, when you're attaching the elastic to the leg opening, just pull it a little bit. You don't need to super stretch your elastic when you sew this on. When you let go, you don't want your thong to crumple up into a little ball. You still want it to have some shape. So I have my zigzag stitch set to the broken zigzag, and I've lengthened my stitch as well. So I have my zigzag stitch set to the broken zigzag, and I've lengthened my stitch as well. You want to play with your stitch width and length according to your elastic. So you want to make sure that your zigzag stitch is within the flat piece of the elastic and that it's not coming over into the little scalloped edge of your lace elastic. When you get to the end, back stitch and cut. So this is the top of the panty, so you'll notice that I didn't stretch it while I was sewing it on, but now we're gonna move over to the leg openings and we're gonna do that stretching of the elastic. When I'm starting off with something like this real delicate, I like to make sure that my fabric's back a little further than it normally would be. I like to get a few stitches in it first, including a back stitch, before I start pulling my elastic. Gonna reposition this. I'm gonna make my stitch width a little narrower. Okay, so we look good. So now when I stretch it, I'm just pulling it a little bit. So you'll notice if I let go, you can kind of see how much it stretches out. So if I've got about 2.5 inches of elastic, I'm gonna go ahead and stretch it out about 3/4. Just keep stretching and lining it up with the edge. I like to keep a hand in the back just to make sure it's still feeding through. So I'm not really pulling it from the back, but I'm just making sure it's nice and consistent with the feed. I'm gonna carefully work our way around this curve, straightening it out as it gets into the machine. Back stitch when you get to the end and cut. So now that the elastic is sewn on the panties right sides together, it should look something like this. It's nice and flat across the top, it's flat across the back, and we've pulled it slightly throughout the legs. So we are not done yet. Now what we need to do is take it and flip it to the inside, and we need to give it another zigzag. So wherever you stretch the elastic, you're going to have to stretch it again and then put another zigzag on top. Basically what we're doing is creating a top stitch, but with the broken zigzag stitch. So it's going to keep this elastic under, and because we're stretching it while we sew it, it's going to allow it to still stretch while we're wearing it. So I'm just gonna pin this under so that way you can see it. So what we're doing is flipping that elastic to the inside, and then it'll look like this when we're finished. So it'll just have that pretty picot elastic popping out of the side. So just like the original panty, we're doing this zigzag stitch right here. And you'll notice that they've even used the broken zigzag stitch. So they've stretched the elastic, turned it under, and zigzagged it down. So don't forget that the back and the front, you're not gonna stretch the elastic, but around the leg holes, you are. So let's do it. Back stitch and cut, and now we're done with that step. Now that we're done turning under the elastic, let's take a look at it. So you can see on the outside, we still have our little decorative picot edge, and then on the inside, our elastic is turned under. So if we flip it over, we can also see what the front is starting to look like. Now what we're gonna do is sew some tubes and insert some elastics. That way we get these really fun, scrunchy-esque sides. I just love the detail these create. Now what we're gonna do is fold up these tubes here in half, right sides together, and we're gonna sew up a 1/2 inch seam. And we're gonna do that to both pieces of fabric. I have my straight stitch on, and I'm gonna back stitch at the beginning and the end of this. Now that we have the tubes finished, we're gonna grab a safety pin and we're gonna turn them right side out. So I'm pushing the safety pin in, holding it, and pulling the fabric down the safety pin. So that way we're turning it right side out. When you get to the end, you just keep pulling, and there we go. Now we have our nice tube for our elastic. So we're gonna do it to the other one. We're gonna take the safety pin, we're gonna go through one side of the fabric only. We're gonna take the head of the safety pin and we are gonna put it into the tube. We're gonna push with our back thumb, we're gonna hold with our other thumb the tip of the safety pin, and we're gonna pull it off the end. So we're pushing, we're holding, and we're pulling. We're pushing, we're holding, and we're pulling. So you're just gonna keep repeating this until you get all the way to the end where you see your safety pin, and voila, there we go. Now we have two tubes that we can put our elastic into. I'm gonna go iron these tubes nice and flat so they're easier to put the elastic into. Now that our tubes are ironed nice and flat, we're gonna take the elastic, put it on the safety pin, and we're gonna push it all the way through to the other end. Now you need to make sure that you don't lose your elastic in here, and try to make sure that your little tube doesn't get twisted while you're putting it onto the elastic. I cut my elastic 8 inches because that's what was on the panty here. Now that was for a small, so there's gonna be an elastic guide on your pattern when you purchase it. So you wanna follow that for how much elastic to cut for the side of the panty. So now I have the fabric scrunched up on the elastic. So now what I wanna do to the end without this safety pin is I just wanna secure the fabric to the elastic. So I'm just gonna make sure the edges are lining up, and I'm just gonna put on a straight stitch and just sew over it. And I'm gonna do that to both ends, but I wanna make sure I do this end first, and then I can scrunch it all down and remove the safety pin and do the same thing. So we're just gonna sew those ends together, and we're gonna back stitch and cut. And now that we have that end done, we are going to do the other end. So just scrunch down your fabric, remove your safety pin, and now we're just gonna line up these two ends here. And then we're also going to sew over them. Now you're gonna do the same thing to the other tube of fabric and piece of elastic. Our side straps are finished. They are so cute. I love them so much. I think they'd make really great straps for a dress or a top as well. Next, what we're gonna do is take the gold rings and attach them to the panty. So one for each end. So we're gonna take the gold ring, we're gonna fold the panty over about 1/2 of an inch, and then we're gonna sew down. So we're gonna do that to all 4 spots on the panty. So all the ends, 2 in the front and 2 in the back. To make this easy to sew, I put on my all-purpose zipper foot on the right-hand side, and I move my needle position all the way over to the right as well. Now you gotta be careful that you don't sew into that metal ring, otherwise break your needle. So just make sure you're about 1/2 of an inch away from it, and let's just do a straight stitch right down the side of the panty there, making sure that you're back stitching and making the side nice and secure. And now we're gonna do the same thing to all 4 sides. Now we have the little metal rings attached to the sides. They look great on the front. And if we flip it over, you can see right where we sewed it down in the back. And we've done this the same way it's done on the Agent Provocateur thong. So if we look at it, they've just flipped it over and straight stitched it down. Now we're on the very last step. We just need to attach the elastic at the sides to the rings. So I'm gonna show you exactly how to do this, and then we can put them on the dress form and check them out. So what we're gonna do is take it and put it through the ring, and then we're gonna pull it back about 1/2 inch, keep your fabric flat, and then we're just gonna fold it back and sew it down just like we did on the front right here. And we're gonna do that to all 4 sides. And now the other end of this one, you just gotta make sure that you connect it to the back. So basically what we're doing is creating our leg hole here. So we're just using a straight stitch. I'm using that all-purpose zipper foot, and I've got it on the left-hand side now, and I've moved my needle over to the left. We did it, we finished it. Let's take a look at it and then compare it to the Agent Provocateur one. So they both have the nice scrunchy sides, they both have the picot elastic along the side, they both have the cute little bow, mine's drying with some glue right now, and then if we turn them over, they're gonna be roughly the same shape in the back as well. So we've got that little thong shape in the back, we've got this little T shape up here, and we've got all the cute little rings on them holding the straps together. Now let's take a look at it on the form. It is looking great, I just love it. I love how nice the silk lays, I love the little picot edge, I just love the little detail of the ring with the scrunchy sides. The scrunchy sides are just so fun and so soft out of the silk charmeuse. And then we've got our back here with our little rings as well. Overall, I think this panty style turned out great, and it looks just like the Agent Provocateur one. Can you believe it? This Agent Provocateur panty costs $125, and this one that we made today only costs about $10 in supplies. So you can start sewing your own high-end panties now. So next time you're looking to buy a sexy pair of underwear that are high-end, consider making them because it is so easy and you are gonna feel so much sexier and empowered knowing that you made them. If you enjoyed making this super awesome panty today, please leave a thumbs up, give it some applause, and leave a comment down below. Also, I would love to know what other kind of panty videos you guys would love to see because I would love to make them. Because I love making panties, they're just so fun to make. and I know you guys think they are too. So let's keep making some panties together. If you're not yet a subscriber to Sewing Anastasia, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when all the new videos come out every single week. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for following along. And don't forget to follow me on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and all those sites so that way you can stay connected and creative with me. And you can catch the action going on in the studio. So I now teach sewing classes in my design studio, so you can check out all the details on those at sewanastasia.com. You can take them in person or virtually. Also, don't forget, we now have Sewing Anastasia merch shirts, and those are right down below the video. You'll see those little icons with Sewing Anastasia on them. So check them out. You can get water bottles, hoodies, t-shirts, you know, all that good stuff. Also, if you enjoy Sewing Anastasia, make sure you share it with your friends who sew so that way we can get them in on the sewing fun over here. Thank you so much for watching today. Bye!